Welcome to Fear Files, where the shadows come alive and the darkest corners of the unknown are revealed. In each episode, we dive into chilling tales and spine-tingling mysteries that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Brace yourself for a journey into the heart of fear, where every story is a doorway to the supernatural. Turn off the lights, get comfortable, and prepare for a night of unforgettable horror. Welcome to the world of Fear Files, where nightmares become reality.
The night was a shroud of impenetrable darkness as Mark Reynolds drove down the isolated country road. The only sound was the steady hum of the truck's engine and the occasional rustle of wind through the dense forest on either side. Mark's mind wandered as he navigated the winding path, his thoughts drifting to the warmth and safety of home. The road ahead was a ribbon of blackness, broken only by the harsh beam of the truck's headlights. As he rounded a bend, the lights illuminated a solitary figure standing by the roadside, a hitchhiker. Mark slowed the truck and rolled down the window, his fatigue outweighing his apprehension. "Need a lift?" Mark called out, trying to mask his weariness with a friendly tone. The hitchhiker, a woman with long, tangled hair and an aura of quiet desperation, nodded without speaking. Mark studied her in the dim light, noting her unsettling stillness. She seemed almost too calm for someone stranded on such a desolate road. "Hop in," Mark said, gesturing toward the passenger seat. The woman climbed in silently, and Mark resumed driving. The interior of the truck was bathed in the soft glow of the dashboard lights, casting eerie shadows that danced across their faces. Mark glanced at the woman periodically, her face hidden beneath the brim of her hat. Something about her presence unsettled him, but he attributed it to the late hour and his own exhaustion. As the truck rumbled through the night, Mark's unease grew. He stole glances at the rearview mirror, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman's reflection. Instead, he saw an empty space where she should have been. The mirror showed nothing but the darkness of the road behind them. Mark's heart skipped a beat, but he shook off his unease. It was probably just a trick of the light. "Everything all right back there?" Mark asked, trying to sound casual. The woman's voice was soft, almost ethereal. "Long nights often reveal hidden truths," she said cryptically. "The darkness has a way of showing what we are too afraid to see." Mark shivered despite the warmth of the truck's interior. He accelerated, eager to get to the next town and shake off the creeping discomfort. The night air grew colder, and Mark could see his breath misting in the dim light. The silence inside the truck was thick, interrupted only by the rhythmic rumble of the engine. The woman's demeanor began to shift. Her calm facade dissolved, revealing glimpses of a horrifying visage. Her eyes, once shadowed, now glowed with an otherworldly light. Her face twisted into a grotesque mask of decay and malevolence. Mark's grip on the steering wheel tightened. The truck's headlights flickered, casting erratic shadows on the trees. He glanced at the rearview mirror again, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The woman's reflection had vanished, replaced by a swirling vortex of darkness. "Who are you?" Mark's voice trembled, his fear rising. "I am the keeper of forgotten horrors," the woman's voice echoed, now a distorted blend of wails and whispers. "The shadows of the past come to claim those who dare to forget." Mark's mind raced. He was trapped on this desolate road with a vengeful spirit. The thought of confronting this supernatural entity filled him with dread. He pushed the truck to its limits, the road blurring as he sped through the night. The woman's voice grew louder, her words filled with cryptic warnings and chilling revelations. "Turn back!" she screamed, her voice reverberating with ancient malice. "The darkness cannot be escaped!" Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to keep control of the vehicle. His thoughts flashed through his own past, mistakes, regrets, and the unresolved pain that had haunted him for years. The woman's torment was not just a random occurrence, but a manifestation of his own deepest fears and unresolved issues. As the truck swerved through the darkness, Mark's thoughts became a maelstrom of confusion and terror. He realized that the woman was a reflection of his own guilt and unresolved trauma. Her appearance and messages were designed to make him confront the darkest corners of his psyche. With a surge of determination, Mark gathered his courage. "I will not let you control me," he shouted, his voice echoing with defiance. The woman's form wavered, her grotesque visage shifting between horrifying and ephemeral. Mark grabbed the truck's emergency kit, pulling out a flashlight. He shone the light directly at her, the beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. The woman's form recoiled from the light, her screams growing fainter. Mark kept the flashlight trained on her, his hands shaking but resolute. Slowly, her figure began to dissipate, her wails fading into the night. The cold air lifted, and the truck's engine roared back to life. Mark's breath came in ragged gasps as he drove on, the oppressive sense of dread gradually receding. The road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, but the worst of the nightmare appeared to be behind him. As he approached the next town, the first light of dawn began to break through the darkness, symbolizing a new beginning. He pulled into a gas station, the bright lights of the station contrasting sharply with the dark road he had just traversed. Mark took a deep breath, the ordeal leaving him both shaken and relieved. The attendant gave him a curious look as he filled up the tank, but Mark said nothing, his mind still grappling with the surreal experience. The rest of the journey home was uneventful, but the encounter with Evelyn Crow had left an indelible mark on Mark. He knew that the reflection of terror he had faced was not merely a ghostly apparition, but a confrontation with his own unresolved fears. He would carry the memory of that night with him, a constant reminder of the shadows that lurk within and the strength required to overcome them. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Mark finally reached home. He was greeted by the warmth and familiarity of his family, their concerned faces reflecting their relief at his safe return. He embraced them, feeling a profound sense of gratitude and relief. Elder Moore's Road remained a silent witness to Mark's harrowing journey, its secrets and fears laid bare. The encounter with Evelyn Crow had been a test of his courage and resilience. Though the night had passed, the reflection of terror would never truly fade away, lingering as a reminder of the darkness that can dwell within and the strength needed to confront it. The night was an unrelenting void as Sarah Mitchell drove down the deserted highway. Her headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow ribbon of asphalt surrounded by dense, shadowy woods. The quiet was absolute, save for the steady hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. After a grueling shift at the emergency room, Sarah was eager to get home to her family. As she drove, the monotonous scenery began to blur together. The road stretched endlessly ahead, and Sarah's exhaustion made the drive feel interminable. The only relief came from the occasional mile marker that appeared briefly in the headlights before disappearing into the darkness. It was then that Sarah noticed something strange. The same mile marker appeared again, and then again, as though mocking her sense of progress. She frowned, checking the odometer and the time, but everything seemed normal. Shaking her head, she attributed the anomaly to her fatigue and pressed on, trying to push the unsettling feeling aside. The air grew colder, and the headlights cast an eerie glow on the road. Sarah's unease intensified as she saw ghostly figures appear on the roadside, their forms indistinct and barely visible. They seemed to emerge from the darkness, their faces twisted in expressions of despair and pain. As she sped past, their ghostly forms dissipated into the night. With each pass of the mile marker, the apparitions became more tangible. Their forms solidified, revealing bloodied and disfigured figures that clawed at the windows, their eyes pleading for help. Their mouths moved, whispering fragmented, haunting messages that Sarah could barely make out. "Help us! Trapped! Can't escape! Sarah's heart raced. She slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop. The truck's headlights illuminated the figures more clearly now, their forms reflecting in the glass like a grotesque nightmare. Panic surged as she tried to comprehend what was happening. "Why are you showing me this?" Sarah shouted into the darkness, her voice trembling with fear. "What do you want from me?" The apparitions continued to claw at the windows, their pleas growing more desperate. Sarah rolled up the windows and locked the doors, but the ghost's presence was suffocating, their anguish palpable. With a surge of determination, Sarah accelerated again, trying to outrun the nightmarish vision. The mile marker reappeared almost immediately, and the cycle continued. Each time, the spirits grew more desperate, their features more detailed, their voices more coherent. She tried to reason with them, her voice a strained mixture of empathy and fear. "I can't help you if you don't tell me what's going on." Their responses were fragmented, filled with cryptic hints about an accident, a tragic event that had left them bound to this cursed stretch of road. Sarah pieced together their fragmented messages, learning about a devastating crash years ago that had claimed many lives. The spirits were trapped, endlessly reliving their final moments, and their torment was now being projected onto her. The highway seemed to stretch infinitely, the mile marker a cruel reminder of her entrapment. Sarah's mind raced as she struggled to find a way out. She remembered stories of supernatural phenomena involving cursed places and tried to think of any way to break the cycle. Desperation drove her to try everything she could think of: prayers, chants, even attempting to drive in reverse. Nothing worked. Her sense of time began to distort. The hours felt like days, the darkness pressing in around her. Fatigue and fear began to blur her perception, making her doubt her own sanity. The spirits' pleas grew more insistent, their forms pressing against the glass, their cries echoing through the truck. She could barely keep her eyes open, but she had to fight the overwhelming sense of dread that threatened to pull her into despair. In a moment of clarity, Sarah recalled a story her grandmother once told her about spirits trapped between worlds, seeking redemption for their unfinished business. Could these spirits be trying to communicate something crucial to break the cycle? Her grandmother had said that sometimes acknowledging the spirits and showing them compassion could help them find peace. Resolute, Sarah slowed the truck again, facing the apparitions once more. She took a deep breath, her voice steady despite the fear. "I'm here. I'm listening. I'm sorry for what happened to you. Please, tell me what I need to do to help you find peace." The spirits' cries softened, their forms wavering as if they were struggling to reach out. Their faces reflected a mixture of relief and continued torment. Sarah could see flashes of their lives before the accident, happy moments, mundane scenes, and then the horrific crash. They were trapped in a loop of their final moments, unable to move on. As she continued to speak to them, the ghost's presence seemed to waver. The highway appeared less oppressive, the trees and shadows receding. Sarah felt a strange sensation of warmth and light, as if the darkness was lifting. She focused on expressing her empathy and understanding, trying to offer them comfort and closure. Gradually, the apparitions began to fade, their forms dissolving into the night. The mile marker, once a relentless symbol of her torment, disappeared from view. The road stretched ahead, no longer an endless loop, but a path leading away from the horror she had faced. Exhausted but relieved, Sarah drove cautiously into the early morning light. The town she arrived in was bathed in the soft glow of dawn, a welcome sight after the terror of the night. She pulled into a diner, her hands shaking as she turned off the engine. Inside, the warmth and normalcy of the diner felt like a stark contrast to the horrors she had endured. The chatter of patrons and the aroma of coffee provided a comforting normalcy. Sarah ordered a coffee, her mind still grappling with the night's events. She felt a profound sense of empathy for the spirits she had encountered, and their suffering had left an indelible mark on her. As she sipped her coffee, Sarah reflected on the events of the night. She had faced her deepest fears and emerged with a newfound understanding of the unresolved pain that can haunt the living. The encounter with the spirits had tested her courage and compassion, and she carried with her a reminder of the importance of acknowledging and addressing past traumas. The road that had once seemed endless now held a new meaning. The reflection of the spirit's anguish had been a trial, but Sarah had confronted the darkness and emerged stronger, with a renewed sense of empathy and understanding. The endless mile had led her to a deeper awareness of the ways in which the past can continue to influence the present, and the importance of seeking resolution and closure for those who are trapped in their own personal hells. As she left the diner and continued her journey home, the horizon stretched out before her, a symbol of new beginnings and the promise of peace. Sarah knew that the road ahead would not always be smooth, but she was ready to face whatever came her way with the strength and resilience forged from her harrowing experience on the endless mile. The fog rolled in thick and heavy as David Reynolds drove along the desolate country road, its dense blanket obscuring the world outside. The headlights of his car cut through the mist in narrow beams, barely penetrating the oppressive shroud that surrounded him. David's mind was preoccupied with the stress of his recent business trip, and he was eager to return home. As he navigated the winding road, a mile marker came into view, its reflective surface barely visible through the fog. David checked the time and sighed, realizing he still had miles to go before reaching home. He turned his attention back to the road, only to notice a faint, glowing light in his rearview mirror. At first, he dismissed it as a trick of the fog or a vehicle in the distance. But the light grew closer, and David's unease deepened. The source of the glow was a spectral vehicle, its headlights casting an unnatural blue hue. The car appeared old-fashioned, its chrome details shimmering faintly in the fog. David's heart pounded as he realized the vehicle was gaining on him, despite his attempts to increase speed. "Great," David muttered to himself, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Just what I needed, some phantom car chasing me." He tried to shake off his growing fear, but the spectral vehicle remained persistently close. No matter how fast David drove, the car stayed right behind him, its presence almost palpable. The fog seemed to thicken with each passing minute, turning the world outside into an impenetrable void. As David looked ahead, he noticed shadowy figures emerging from the fog, standing on the roadside and partially obscured by the mist. They seemed to be guiding him towards an unknown destination, their forms shifting and wavering like ghosts in the darkness. The figures were silent, their presence more unsettling than any sound could be. David's anxiety mounted. The spectral vehicle's blue headlights seemed to pierce through the fog, and he could see the ghostly outline of the driver within the car. The driver's face was obscured, but there was an aura of malevolence that radiated from the vehicle. The whispers of fear and dread filled David's mind, making it difficult to think clearly. "What do you want from me?" David shouted into the fog, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Why are you following me?" The phantom vehicle did not respond, but the pressure of its pursuit was unrelenting. David tried every tactic he could think of to escape the spectral menace. He swerved and changed lanes, hoping to throw off the ghostly car, but it remained inescapably close. As the road twisted and turned, the fog seemed to close in even tighter, making it increasingly difficult to see. The shadowy figures on the road ahead grew more defined, their expressions hauntingly desperate. They reached out towards David as if trying to pull him into the fog. Desperation clawed at David's sanity. He felt as though he was trapped in a nightmarish loop, with no escape from the relentless pursuit. The phantom vehicle's headlights cast eerie reflections on the road, and the fog seemed to close in tighter with each passing moment. "I need to find a way out of this," David thought, his mind racing for a solution. "There has to be something I can do." The fog began to thin slightly, and David saw a faint, eerie light in the distance, a distant structure or perhaps an exit. With renewed determination, he pressed on, hoping that reaching this light would offer him a chance to escape. As he neared the light, the shadowy figures grew more intense, their forms becoming almost tangible. They reached out towards him with a sense of urgency and desperation, their eyes filled with silent pleas. The phantom vehicle's presence remained unyielding, its headlights casting an otherworldly glow on the road. David reached the light and found himself at a crossroads, a fork in the road that seemed to offer a way out. He hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. The spectral vehicle loomed close behind him, its presence almost suffocating. In a moment of clarity, David realized that the shadows and the phantom vehicle were manifestations of his own fears and unresolved guilt. The relentless pursuit and the ghostly figures were a reflection of his internal struggles, manifesting in the supernatural. With a deep breath, David took the left fork, following the path illuminated by the eerie light. The fog began to clear, and the spectral vehicle's pursuit seemed to wane. The shadows on the road faded, and David felt a sense of relief as he drove away from the oppressive darkness. The road ahead was still dark, but it no longer felt as menacing. The fog receded, revealing the gentle glow of dawn breaking through the trees. David's heartbeat gradually slowed, and he began to feel a sense of calm and clarity. As the first light of morning touched the landscape, David pulled into a roadside diner, grateful for the warmth and normalcy of the early morning scene. The diner's neon sign flickered reassuringly in the early light, offering a stark contrast to the nightmarish experience he had just endured. David entered the diner, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon greeted him. He sat down at a booth and took a deep breath, reflecting on the harrowing journey he had just completed. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile, brought him a cup of coffee. "Rough night?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. David nodded, staring into his coffee cup. "You could say that." The waitress gave him a sympathetic smile before moving on to attend to other customers. David sipped his coffee slowly, letting the warmth and comfort of the diner wash over him. He glanced out the window, watching as the sun climbed higher in the sky, dispelling the remnants of fog and darkness. The encounter with the phantom driver had been a terrifying ordeal, but it had also served as a powerful reminder of the importance of facing one's fears and seeking resolution for past actions. David realized that the spectral pursuit was not just a supernatural event, but a manifestation of his own internal struggles and unresolved guilt. As he finished his coffee and prepared to leave, David felt a profound sense of closure. The road that had once seemed endless and terrifying now held the promise of new beginnings and the hope of a brighter future. He knew that the journey ahead would not always be smooth, but he was ready to face whatever came his way with newfound strength and understanding. David stepped outside into the fresh morning air, feeling the first hints of a new day's warmth on his face. He looked back at the diner and then down the road he had traveled. The fog had lifted, and the path was clear. With a deep breath, he set off down the road, ready to embrace the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The phantom pursuit had been a harrowing experience, but it had also provided David with a chance for personal redemption and growth. As he drove away from the diner and into the morning light, he felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. The road may have been dark and treacherous, but David had emerged from the darkness with a stronger sense of purpose and a clearer understanding of himself.
Thanks for joining us on this harrowing journey through the world of horror. If the chills are still lingering and you can't get enough of the dark and eerie, don't forget to subscribe to Fear Files and hit the notification bell so you never miss a spine-tingling tale. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below and let us know what frightful stories you'd like to see next. Until next time, remember, the darkness may be just around the corner, But here at Fear Files, we're always ready to face it together. Stay scared and keep exploring the unknown.